Hey, so welcome back to another Whiskey Wednesday with Vinny's Beverage Depot. I'm Pat from the Whiskey Hotline, joined by Brett, of course. We have a beer whiskey collab thing going on today. So we've got Jeff Joslin joining us from the Left Hand Brewery in Colorado. Jeff, you're the director of brewing operations, right?
Correct.
Pretty cool. How long you been with Left Hand?
Coming up on 8 years.
Okay. I probably met you at one point. We had a big group out there for GABF and toured around and drank entirely too much beer. So.
I'm sure, and I'm sure it's fuzzy for me too.
And we've got a crew from Foundry Distilling with us. We've got Greg, who is the head distiller. We've got Andrew, the brand ambassador, marketing guy, right? We'll call it marketing. Sorry to sully brand ambassador with the word marketing. And I'm sorry, assistant distiller. What is your name? I already forgot.
Ben.
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 All right.
It's our friend Ben, Pat. Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our dear friend Ben. So we're talking about Foundry's Sinister Malt whiskey today, and this is part of a larger project where they're kind of partnering with some breweries. But I guess 101 Foundry crew, can you give us a little background on the distillery itself, how long you guys have been going, and what the whole focus is over there?
Sure. So Foundry Distilling Company located in historic Valley Junction, which is West Des Moines, Iowa, right here smack dab in the middle of the state, started in 2018. We're located in an old rail car facility. That was actually the Foundry when they repaired rail cars, hence the name Foundry Distilling Company. We started out like a lot of distilleries producing clear spirits and started aging our whiskeys. We've got a 5-grain, we have a single malt, we have a bourbon. We're working on some barrel-aged Manhattans, but part of what our big plan was the Brewer Distiller Alliance, and that is working with some of the best breweries in the country, as well as several local ones, taking beer wash or wort, bringing it here to Foundry Distilling Company, fermenting it, and then barrel aging it here, returning it to the markets where it originally came from and selling it here in Iowa. So in a nutshell, that's what that is for Brewer Distiller Alliance. Scott Bush, the owner, couldn't make it here today. Formerly was the person who started Templeton Rye Whiskey. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of partnerships back then with sending our used whiskey barrels to our brewery friends all over the country. And Scott had always wondered what would it be like to kind of reverse that situation, get some wash or wort from some of the most popular or well-known beers at other breweries or at breweries. And, kind of the thing is, what would it be if your favorite beer was made into a whiskey? And we think we've got a really good sense of that now. And the Sinister whiskey, we think, turned out great. Started out as the Left Hand nitro milk stout.
So this is the first time we've had a Foundry Brewer Alliance whiskey available in Illinois, right? Or did we miss one along the way?
Nope, that is correct.
And you guys had done one. I know you did one with Surly at one point because somebody had asked us for that at some point. How long has this been going on with the brewer thing? Since you guys started?
Since day one. So this summer will be our 3rd year in business. So we've had these aging since before our doors were actually open to the public.
Oh, wow.
So here's a question as we get into this on the side, and then maybe this is a good transition to the brewery. So how do you so you're doing all the fermentation on site. How are you stabilizing wort, especially to truck it from Colorado? How are you stabilizing wort to truck it from Colorado to Iowa to be fermented and then distilled without getting a spontaneous fermentation or anything other bad happening, especially a milk stout?
So on our side, we do all our typical battery of QA tests up to that point. So we brew the wort, we knock it out as cold as we can get it from our heat exchanger. Then we crash it to -1C. And then the tanker that comes is cleaned. It's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's kosher actually, because it's got a higher cleaning standard. And it gets trucked out to Des Moines cold pretty much as fast as that trucker can legally drive.
Those are some pretty high-tech tankers as well. Those are completely insulated. When we receive the wort on site, the delta and temperature range is less than a degree majority of the time.
Wow.
That's amazing. Good. We need advice. We have a friend who wants to truck pure press cane juice from Louisiana to California to distill it through a cognac still. So I'll tell him that we're going to hook him up with you guys to get this tanker.
Sure.
So, I mean, maybe this is a question for Jeff. I mean, do you have to modify the mash bill at all in knowing that it's going to be distilled? Is this the same mash bill? And then if you guys were fermenting it in Iowa, are you using the same brewer's yeast he would normally be using in Colorado, or are you using a more distiller's yeast?
Pat, those are really good questions. Those are things that we talked about when we started this. They had certain parameters that they were looking to hit, but we really wanted as close to milk stout nitro as possible, but it's not exactly milk stout nitro. It's a beefed up imperial. It's got additional sugar thrown in as well to really raise the sugar content to make it as efficient for them as possible in the still. But it is really close to good old milk stout nitro.
Yeah,
So
essentially.
there-
And sorry. Okay. And I'm going to back up for a moment too. Whereas, we're accepting, of course, the wort that's arriving at our facility via the tanker truck, and we will, yes, ferment on site, but of course also distill the batch on site, barrel everything on site, and then those barrels get transported to storage. So what we're taking off the still is, if this was made illegally, we'd call it moonshine, but this is distillate, or white lightning, as we call it, white dog. So this concentrated version of milk stout post-fermentation is getting laid down in these barrels. And I love the question about yeast. We use a very sturdy yeast called a Red Star Dry Distiller's yeast, to ensure that we have the most conversion possible and essentially get the wort as dry as possible post-fermentation, so we're able to have as much of that distillate come forward into the barrels as possible.
So how strong is that beer before it goes to the still?
It's roughly 10% ABV to 11% ABV.
Okay.
So then because there have been various different fits and starts. I believe you're the first distillery really completely dedicated to just doing this. There are a couple of other places that are. The first one, right off the top of my head, that did it was New Holland, playing around with experiments. That was 10, 15 years ago. They actually created a product called Hatter Royale, which was their Mad Hatter. One of the things they did when they distilled, they made Mad Hatter IPA all the way up to the point, with the exception they didn't hop the beer itself. They distilled and then back added the hops. How are you guys dealing with hops? Because they don't always distill very well. They tend to get real sort of nasty and
Gross.
metallic and phenolic. Yeah.
Exactly. And, especially early on, we were, doing our research, doing our homework, tasting whiskeys that perhaps had hops in them. And, that's exactly right. That's a flavor profile that we weren't exactly going for. And also, we're not able to call this a whiskey if it has hops in it altogether. So all those are removed.
Okay. So that's a little bit of deconstruction, which again, for people who are out there who are worried about authenticity, trust me, you don't want the hops in there when they're distilling stuff through, because that really comes out well.
One question, I just took a sip of this and it's remarkably full-bodied. Left-hand milk stout, of course, for anyone who might not know, is very famous for its addition of lactose or milk sugar. Did that come into play in the distillate at all?
Well, we actually requested that, this was a conversation back and forth between the left-hand team and, of course, us over here at the Foundry team. The lactose in particular, just by virtue of having it added, we also noticed that it was perhaps going to go to waste, because lactose is actually a non-fermentable.
It's non-fermentable, yeah.
Unfortunately, that had to be removed. And perhaps,
Okay.
Jeff, you can comment a little bit on that too, if you would like.
Yeah, the grain bill is like I said, an imperial milk stout. It's
Okay.
not really a milk stout. I actually pulled up the recipe for this, and I forgot I wrote it as in quotation marks, a milk stout, since there is no lactose.
Yeah.
It is substituted with good old sucrose to bump that fermentability for them.
Okay. Cool.
So interestingly enough, what was the outcome? Because everything went, and people don't, if you really truly took an exact beer and distilled it, you probably wouldn't get necessarily a great product. So you really need to do sort of make some of these alterations to adjust what you're doing to distillation. What did the beer taste like when you were done fermenting? How far was it? How much closer was it to a true whiskey wash in terms of acidity and things like that versus?
Well, definitely the imperial version. Of course,
Right.
flat. A lot less carbonation, of course. Because we're not carving this. There's no hops in it. We're not anticipating this going into a keg or a bottle, or at least not as a beer format. It's I would still say it's holistically there, of course. It still resembles, of course, it has those characteristics that we associate with milk stout altogether, or milk stout. I love that, Jeff. Milk stout altogether, but it's essentially, yes, that imperial version, and a lot more flat and a touch more. Well, actually, no, not even a touch, just a lot more dry.
Yeah, but it still has there's still a lot of weight on the palate with this.
Yeah, it's got that kind of chocolatey, roasty. It's still, you can tell that it's got that beer connection too.
Yeah, they did send out some of the White Dog for us to try, and I was blown away actually at how chocolatey that was. Obviously, it was clear, but it just came across so rich. It was stunning. I was really impressed with what these.
Yeah, and that's kind of unusual, right, from distillation, because usually if you get that sort of character, it doesn't necessarily come off of distillation. It comes after it's been in wood for a while, where you'll pull up a little bit of like lactone, and especially if you're using toasted barrel. I mean, for me, it seems unusual to get that level of flavor off of distillate, unless you're making it like super estery. I know what kind of still are you guys running on? I mean, you can kind of see it in the background a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It was running that still right behind me. A 21 plate continuous reflux column still.
Wow, 21 plates. That's a big still. Cool. And is everything, so all the different whiskeys you guys are making, you're making on the same still. Are you adjusting plates at all depending on the wash or anything?
No, that's kind of, essentially that we're trying to hit that 10% alcohol by volume, 11% alcohol by volume mark. Sometimes, our still is designed to be able to operate with that percent ABV at its highest performance. So each plate, it's engineered to operate with 10% alcohol by volume wash.
Okay.
And actually, I don't mean to jump it back a little bit, but I want to agree with Jeff right there. I love reminiscing, if you will, on the moonshiner or the White Dog that of milk stout altogether. It like Christmas hot chocolate. It was like that at 80% alcohol by volume. It was incredible to see.
How's the brewer reaction been to these things when you guys? I assume you're not just cold calling a brewery and saying, "Hey, we really like this IPA. We'd like to make a whiskey out of it." I assume some of them tell you like, "No, I don't want you're going to sully the good name of my beer or anything," or has it been? They're generally a pretty adventurous bunch, I suppose.
I imagine the process has probably evolved since they approached Left Hand, but I'll start with it from my side. So Scott did more or less cold call us and do exactly what you just described. And I love whiskey. I love most spirits, but I love whiskey especially. And obviously I love beer. So I've always loved that tie, and I was really intrigued by it. And so I was pretty quick to be like, yeah, what do we need to do? It was essentially a cold call, and we sat down in our tasting room, and he introduced himself and explained the whole thing, and I was sold right there.
Yeah, we had somewhat of a friendship with Eric Wallace, and then our relationship with the guys at Stone out in California, that was from us sending them barrels to do barrel-aged beers in. We had a relationship with Boulevard going way back in Kansas City. And then at a national level, we're also working with Surly. So I think I think there was some hesitancy on some people's part, but I also think that people thought this was a very unique idea. And the idea with this is not to do the Left Hand Nitro Milk Stout again next year. It will be, what was it next year?
Galactic Cowboy.
That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, a new upcoming brand, done with Left Hand as well.
So yeah, we're trying to make these where we switch them up each year and kind of keep them fresh with the consumer.
It's that craft beer model, always new, right?
Right. Well, here, how are you? So what is, and obviously you've got planning on this. You're out a couple of 3 years, right? For the amount of time from distillation till you get through barrel aging. If you start to move into some of these beers that are more heavily hopped, are you going to be doing anything on the back end with the hops? If you're pulling them out of the fermentation, are you going to be doing anything on the back end as a flavoring component on the back end, which sometimes might work slightly better than, distilling them?
Yeah, thus far we have experimented, but nothing that has been released as its own product per se, like Furious Whiskey with, made using Furious IPA from Surly Brewing Company. No, nothing has been back flavored or back infused with hop oils, anything like that per se. We have done some experiments regarding the effects of that during aging and then post aging, of course, but nothing so far in the realm of that kind of back flavor.
I would assume it would be pretty volatile and hard to keep it tasting consistent for, years on down the road.
It depends. I mean, even just today, we cracked open a barrel of an experiment, let's call it, including some hops in it, and we were pretty amazed with how those hops were rounded out from exclusively bitter to also have, like a candied citrus and also this bittering effect. If you want to comment on that too.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, for the IPAs that we've done, the hops have been taken out, but that citrus component that hops can kind of bring through in a beer has absolutely came through in finished whiskeys. And with this experiment barrel we just tasted today, it was similar. It wasn't a bitter through the roof IPA feel. It was more of there's like some very vibrant citrus floral components to this whiskey.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can play through. Look, Charbet has kind of been doing some whacked out little tiny runs of stuff where he's done on both sides of it, and it doesn't seem to be an issue with a couple of things that he's been playing with on the side.
Yeah.
So both on the back end in terms of, I mean, I think on Pat's stability, right? I think like everything else, you have to be very judicious about how, just like more brewers should be when they're making beer. You need to be very judicious about how you use your hops.
Get off his old man beer lawn. Have you guys tried making a whiskey out of a finished beer, or is that just like a complete waste of resources?
I wouldn't call it a waste of resources. However, we have not yet dove into a fully finished beer and producing a whiskey out of it. We have been proposed for doing it in the past, but we just, especially with when, COVID rolled around and whatnot, we were looking to do some with the brewery in town, but that just, with COVID, that kind of just fell out of conversation. It's not outside of the realm of possibility though, but no, not this far.
Yeah, I mean, that was a kind of happy accident for a couple other breweries with COVID, where at least one guy in town here, Revolution, took a bunch of finished kegs of their IPA that were going to go bad, and they sent them down to the CH distillery, and they got turned into a special batch of Chicago's favorite liquor, Malort, that has somehow made it taste even more terrible than the regular Malort.
Oh, no, are you kidding me? That was excellent.
I'll say,
Don't listen to him. The Rev Malort was pretty damn good.
Oh man.
I mean, it tasted more miserable.
I'll have to see if that's out here in Colorado, because I have some bad memories of Malort too.
Actually didn't. I'll see if we have any tucked away. It literally, they launched it. It went to the tasting room at Rev, the tasting room at CH downtown, and to us.
Yeah,
it was kind of
send your local guy Ben in to see us, and we should have some stashed away somewhere.
Oh, I will.
And
if Ben's not watching this right now, I will text him when we're done.
Yeah, and they also did. There was a nice component to that because Josh and Tremaine, who owns CH, also a portion of the money that they made selling that, because there was an upcharge. The upcharge they made selling that actually went to a on-premise relief fund. Mm-hmm. For, at the time when they first did it, to people who had lost jobs in the service trade just due to the fact that all the bars and restaurants were closed. So
I-
they didn't just capitalize and take all the money themselves. They actually put some of it back in the service community. So
That's great. And actually, this is the first time I'm hearing about this specific Malort. Was it branded with Revolution on the label too, or something along those lines? That's wow.
And then they did it again this year, and they did 4 different labels on it, and it's, typical, very Revolution style labels. They got some pretty colorful, interesting labels. It was cool.
Can you send a bottle our way, honestly? And to Jeff too.
right.
We should be able to figure that out.
I'm sure we've got a couple tucked away.
So tasting this whiskey, I don't want to distract too much from what we actually want to taste here today. This was aged in new charred oak, and that's something that, Brett and I have kind of historically cringed at with American malt whiskey because it tends to just really dominate the malt. But I think with all this roasted malt character in here, kind of had a nice balancing act with that new charred oak. Do you guys normally use a charred barrel when you're doing these beer batches, or do you try to work some new oak into it as well?
Yeah, majority of the time they're charred, char level number 3, new American white oak barrels. Usually we're doing at the 30-gallon capacity scale, as opposed to the macro distillery 53-gallon barrel. There's a little bit quicker turnaround time regarding the age of the whiskey. As you can tell, I mean, this is at 24 months, which by virtue of the surface area on the inside of the barrel, by also the volume of liquid inside the barrel, it is roughly similar to a 4.5-year-old, call it 4.5-year-old bourbon out of a 53-gallon barrel.
Except all the heavy phenols haven't been allowed to oxidize out.
Yeah, you're missing some oxidation time there, but it works here. It really does. I'm not dogging on it.
Well, no, I got you. The fun thing to note, especially with this whiskey though, is it's played into, I like to call it, into like a s'more-like caliber, like kind of like that graham cracker sweetness and burnt sugars and whatnot coming to fruition, but not overpowering the malt altogether. That chocolate malted barley is still coming through, which is, it's been incredible to see as it's aged, but of course, as it started its life coming off the still and in a bottle.
And you said 3 char, interesting another way. Are you toasting the barrels at all before the 3 char?
Toasting, no. They're seasoned, yes, but no, not toasted.
Okay. So who are you getting the barrels from?
From the Barrel Mill in Avon, Minnesota, northwest
Minnesota.
of Twin Cities.
Yep.
Yeah, they've turned into a pretty big cooperage over the last 10 years or so.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
All right, cool. So what's next with this, with the Brewer Alliance series? What are we going to see next? Is this only a once-a-year thing, or they're ready when they're ready?
I like, we do a lot of course, sampling here at the distillery, and each whiskey, plays its own. Each whiskey operates in every barrel differently, especially with like Surly, we were leaning towards a little bit older. That ended up being 30 months, or the Furious whiskey ended up being 30 months. What is coming up next, however, is Boulevard 6th Glass. We took their quadruple ale 2 years ago.
Nice.
That is going
Great
to be the
beer.
next one coming out early Q1 next year. And kind of like forecasting down the line, I mean, we've done 4 brands thus far, or well, we are waiting to do the 4th. That's coming up here later this month with Left Hand. Doing, of course, Galactic Cowboy, which is coming out Q2 2022. And then Sawtooth Amber Ale Whiskey, that's going to be mid 2023. And then Fade to Black, the foreign stout with a little bit of smoked malt in there too. That's going to be in 2024.
That beer is truly exceptional. Truly exceptional. That Fade to Black, that export stout, it was like the only export stout on the market when it first launched. I mean, this would have been like, what, 2009 or something, Jeff? I mean, it was real early on in my career at Vinny's, I know that, and it just blew me away how good that beer was.
Yeah, that beer was, that started what was originally a series, and that one was so good, we just scrapped the series idea and just kept making that one. So yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. So, I mean, do you guys have a dream brewery you want to work with, or has anybody called up you and said, hey,
I'm sure
we'd really like to see this get made whiskey? I mean, assuming not Left. I mean, Left Hand has multiple entries, so you assume Left Hand's the favorite. But somebody's got to be number 2.
Oh, well, for ones that were, as in for ones that we would like to work with in the future, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, I
ones-
guess, or I mean, have any sought out you since this has gotten a little more wider release?
I gotcha. I know, well, I'm actually from Chicagoland, so it's funny that you said Revolution. In the future, perhaps that may be a possibility. So that's one in our radar thus far, but.
Well, and I'm sure you got to be chasing Toppling too, right?
Well, maybe we were just kind of side conferencing. Yes, we do have Toppling Goliath, the pseudo soup put away.
Cool.
That's of course here local to us in Iowa.
Mhm.
You know, we've worked with several local breweries in Iowa, not at the same scale as we have with some of our larger national partners, but I'll let Greg speak to the volume on the pseudo Sioux whiskey. We definitely know that that's a special partner being this local to us and their popularity. So we're looking very forward to that.
Yes, indeed. And in regards to pseudo Sioux whiskey, that is likely going to be in mid 2023 as well. Looking forward to it.
Do you have a cooker there? So, and I didn't know we talked to you. Are you running in between times? Are you running any standard bourbon or rye or malt through in between the brewery projects?
Yes, absolutely. And we have two smaller fermenters on site. Actually, you might be able to see the big fermenter behind me, right? Oh, no, you're not able to. I apologize. We have the main 8,000 gallon fermentation vessel we're working with, you know, at the tanker load scale, we'll call it, or at the large scale, you know, like with left hand and whatnot. But we also have two smaller fermenters that we run like private barrel batches where folks can come in and make a dream whiskey with us. We'll be able to ferment in those small fermenters. We have also a pot still as well, where we're able to do those small batches at a time. We're always turning something over, and those tanker size scale batches are flipped every 2 weeks. So we'll expect, you know, it'll ferment in 8 to 9 days. We'll run the still for 2 days and then a day down for cleaning, preparing for the next batch coming up. And then we'll start it all over again, you know, 14-day cycles.
That is a long ferment.
5,000 gallons, 5,200 gallons at a time. Also to make sure that it's, you know, we're actually dropping down. We want it to as close as water as possible, you know, making sure that we get it as thin as possible, the most alcohol out of it possible. So we also have days built in to ensure that always happens.
And you're distilling on the grain in that column, right? I mean, it's not like Scottish malt where they're going to distill where they're not distilling on the grain.
Well, I think you're just getting wort, right?
That's right. You're just getting
wort.
wort. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
no grain going through the column.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lauder off clear wort, so.
Yeah. Well, what about when you're making bourbon and rye and stuff in house? Is that mostly done on the pot still?
Yes and no. We also work with Granite City Brewing Company. They have been able to help and facilitate, you know, being able to produce our own Trinities, you know, bourbon, single malt, and 5-grain whiskeys. That's also off the grain. We're not putting whole grain or kernels through our column.
Interesting. You don't see that a lot over here. That's cool.
No, yeah, exactly. And then are you filling any of that just for a little bit longer term, since it sounds like you have a little bit more time? Are you filling any of those into 53s?
We've played around a little bit thus far. In the future,
That would certainly be something we would like to do on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there's others. I know that macro distillers are doing, but so are craft distillers.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of time and for balance, will be interesting to see. And if you guys start to just produce, you know, either what a whiskey drinker would consider a standard malt, or a hybrid malt done more along the lines of what somebody like, let's say, Westland has played with, which is processing the grains or using beer malt, but doing all your own mashes and fermentation with beer malt, but then turning around and treating it like a scotch.
So I think we were just having a little side conference. I think the question about like grain handling, we're very lucky in this old neighborhood that we're in this big building. Literally across the street from our building is a place called Fox Brewing Company, and he's a smaller brewer. He does some retail. He's got some kegs, but he does all of the grain handling that when we do batches that I think Greg mentioned it, we do something called the Private Barrel Club. So you can come to Foundry Distilling Company and you can produce your own barrel of whiskey. You choose your own mash bill. You work with our team to kind of come in for a whiskey workshop or a seminar. And most often, if it's timed properly, you can see your whiskey in the still that day, in the pot still. So we do have grain handling capabilities that we, I guess, contract out across the street. And when that mash is set, we send our forklift. I mean, it's literally 100 yards from here. We send the forklift over there to Fox Brewing, pick up the mash, bring it back here, and that's what we then pump into the pot still to produce those private barrels of whiskey for our clients at that level.
And that's the fun part about our business too, our specific Foundry Distilling Company. We're built to collaborate. We're built to have these collaborations with Left Hand Brewing Company, with Fox Brewing Company, with breweries up the street. I like to say, well, we are an all liquid distillery where we actually, have to collaborate and be able to collaborate, and sharing this camaraderie of this industry to be able to produce these spirits. We've had a lot of fun to be able to do so thus far.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to be so nimble like that and be able to do anything and everything. All right, cool.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I have any more questions for him, Brett. Anything else you guys need to communicate to people here? I mean, we kind of got what's coming up next here, how this kind of worked, how much we love Fade to Black Export Stout. I think we covered most things.
Yeah, I mean, on our end, following us on social media, Foundry Distilling Company, we talk about the upcoming releases with our Brewer Distiller Alliance partners. And if somebody's interested, a lot of people don't go on the internet anymore, but brewerdistilleralliance.com, it has a calendar of everything that's come out and everything that's coming out. So that's a kind of a good reference point for people to see what's in the barrel and what's coming down.
And absolutely feel free to come on out and see us. We're 5 hours or so from Chicago, Illinois, but also go out and see Left Hand Brewing Company out in Longmont, Colorado. They have an excellent facility out there. And
slightly longer drive to Longmont, Colorado.
The joke we have in Iowa is, for some reason, you're going to have to drive through Iowa anyway. Might as well stop and see us.
You're driving to Colorado.
Yeah. People always end up. There's a lot of roads out into Iowa, not many out.
There's it is on the road to slightly more exciting destination. I'll give that to Iowa. So
that's fine.
Foundry and Left Hand's Sinister Malt Whiskey is in pretty much every Binny's now. Brett, what's our price on this right now?
We right now are running $49.99.
Cool, pretty damn good whiskey for $50.
Yep, running a sale.
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us about this tonight and kind of unraveling this mysterious malt whiskey. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Jeff from Left Hand, for joining us too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
All right, guys, we'll be in touch. We're looking forward to the next release.
Thank you.
Everybody else, Brett and I will be back. I think the Wednesday after next, we're going to be here, or maybe it is next Wednesday. Got to check the website with Dr. Don Livermore, the master blender from the Corby Canadian Club Distillery. No longer called Canadian Club. What are they calling it now? JP Weiser's Distillery, I guess.
JP Weiser's Distillery.
All right. Yeah. So, Jeff, thanks a lot, man. It was really interesting. Foundry crew, appreciate it, guys. Everybody else, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.